Are you struggling to be consistent with working out? If you're a woman over 40, you're trying to build your fitness and improve your strength and muscle, then you know how important it is to get into the gym on a regular basis. But if you're like many of my clients and community members, you're finding it difficult to do so. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks so much for being with me today. I am so excited to be covering this topic because if there is one question that I get all the time, it's, I start off being consistent with my training and inevitably something happens and I kind of fall off track and it's really hard for me to get going again. How can I find the time, the space, the motivation to continue to be consistent? Because I know consistency is really where I'm going to see results. We've also earlier this year talked about several podcasts relating to mindset. So today's going to be a bit different. We're not really diving headstrong into the mindset pieces, but I highly encourage you to go back and look at those podcasts as well. Before we jump into the episode, wanted to share a quick update with you about what's been happening behind the scenes, since a lot of times y'all don't see all the things that happen behind the scenes to bring you content, to bring you programs and those sorts of things. And it's really fun for me to kind of share the process and the journey along the way. But in September, kind of late August, early September of 2023, I finally launched Strong with Steph. This is my 12-month progressive strength training program that's purpose-built for women over 40. I am so proud of this program. It was definitely a labor of love, over a year in terms of conception to actual launch of this program. We have a full app build out as well through True Coach. It has just been an incredible amount of work, but at the same time, extremely gratifying to really bring those of you over 40 who are looking to improve your strength, your muscle, your fitness, you want to feel strong, to bring you a really comprehensive program that is going to tick the boxes that we need, frankly, as women over 40. So in future episodes, I'm going to be covering some of the different pieces of the programming and why I've created it the way I have and how to get the most out of your strength programming overall, with different concepts regarding training variables and so on and so forth. But for now, we have sort of the first group of people going through this program, and it is so gratifying to see their reports every week. They're writing notes, they're sharing what's happening, the results, and it's just been incredible. So you'll have to check the website to see what's going on currently with the program, but you can find out tons more about it on the info page, and that's at stephgaudreau.com/strong-with-steph. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this topic today, which is if you're struggling to be consistent with working out. There are so many people who are struggling with this, who find that consistency is the number one bane of their existence. So if you are feeling challenged by this, I promise you, you are not alone in feeling what you are feeling. So let's just kind of set that aside and say, you're not the only one. You're not a freak of nature. This is something that a lot of people are really challenged by, especially in midlife. Maybe you're not 20 anymore, especially if you're a woman over 40 who's listening to this, you're going to be in midlife. That's just the way it is. And maybe when you were 20 and maybe you were in college or you just had your first real kind of adult job, you had a lot of time. Maybe you didn't have a partner at that point, or you didn't have kids, or your work life was much simpler than it is now. Maybe you had fewer responsibilities, you had fewer stresses and worries. I know a lot of my friends have had family members that are sick. They're caring for aging family, or family has passed away. And it's just a really stressful time for a lot of us, for a lot of people. So this is one of the things that in midlife we're often challenged by, because it sort of becomes that question of, where do I fit in this training? Where do I fit in exercise in general? And in this episode, I wanted to give you some coaching and insight. This is more of a coaching and insight podcast about your own situation. So here's how I would frame it out. A lot of healthy habits, or a lot of health behavior change that folks are trying to make, involve breaking a habit or stopping doing something. There are numerous examples of this, but a couple that come to mind would be things like smoking cessation, reducing your alcohol intake, or cutting down on screen time. These are just 3 out of the numerous that people will oftentimes say, we're working on this as a way to try to improve our health. We're in our 40s or beyond now. And there's oftentimes kind of this wake up call that comes where maybe we've received some health news for ourselves or a family member. It could just be a time where you're feeling like it's time to take action. Maybe your kiddos are grown and you have more time to put into your own health and well-being and taking care of yourself, and you want to make some changes in your life. So we have those sort of habits that people, or behaviors that people oftentimes want to get rid of. And even along the lines of nutrition, and we could do a whole podcast about how I take a different approach. For example, in my Strength Nutrition Unlocked program, where we're focusing on an inclusive approach. But for the short term here, even nutrition or quote unquote healthier eating in the mainstream oftentimes focuses on getting rid of certain foods. Or, okay, of course, we do have things like add fruits and vegetables, but a lot of times we see, and I see clients come in and say, I have this long list of foods that I'm trying to avoid and just trying to focus on cutting them out. So we have this idea that a lot of health change is focusing on taking things away. This is why we see also in the 40 and up group of women that I work with who are trying to build their fitness, improve their athleticism, build muscle, etc. We're oftentimes not eating until 2 p.m. every day because we've been told we should just not eat. So it's easier to not do something than it is to do something, is kind of the place I'm going here. Exercise is not like that. It's not like any of those things I just mentioned, because exercise cannot be accomplished through subtraction, elimination, or avoidance. We have got to do it. It is that health promoting behavior, that health promoting habit that we cannot avoid in order to make positive change. We have to actively engage. And I know this sounds really simple, but for some reason, when we have that moment of thinking, oh, okay, I can't, yes, I'm trying to avoid all these other things, but I actually have to actively make space and time for training, for working out, for exercise, whatever we want to call it. That's when the challenge kicks in for a lot of people, because exercise takes time, it takes energy, it takes space in your actual daily routine, in your calendar. There are resources that are often involved that make it more challenging than just saying, I'm trying to cut down on my alcohol intake, so therefore I'm just trying to drink less alcohol, as an example. Years ago, I read the book Essentialism. It came out in 2014, and it's written by Greg McKeown. At the time, minimalism was also gaining in popularity as a concept. And I'm not here to knock minimalism or say that it's bad or say that essentialism is better. It's just that as a human, the concept of essentialism really resonated with me a lot more than the concept of minimalism did. And I'm going to explain why that is and what essentialism really is. And this, in my opinion, is one of the more underrated ways that we can start assessing our life to try to free up more space, time, energy, resources. So the idea of essentialism is to create more of those things: space, time, energy, money, by deciding a couple of things. Number one, what's truly important to you. And if you've never sat down and done a values exercise of any kind, it's highly illuminating. You can find many of them online. I've done this with a lot of my students and in my courses, because if we don't know what's important to us, we might not realize why we keep running up against the same obstacles, because there's a mismatch there at some point. So I would suggest that when you're deciding what's truly important to you, to also do a values inventory or a values assessment to help you there. It's not always easy to do, but it can be quite interesting. The second one is to say no to more things that you don't want to do. And this is so hard, especially for people who are helpers, and maybe you have a helping type career. Maybe that's just part of who you are. Service maybe is important to you. But when we say yes to everything, then we, don't have time to take care of ourselves. And exercise is a health promoting behavior. It is well documented to have so many benefits for your health and well-being, physical and mental and emotional health and well-being. But when we say yes to everything, then we don't have that time for ourselves. This is particularly hard for women, especially because we're caretakers. Maybe you've had the responsibility of taking care of the home on top of a lot of other things. And of course, personality tendencies can factor into this as well. And also, essentialism is the idea of doing fewer things, but doing them better. Doing fewer things, but doing them better with higher quality or with higher degrees of attention. And this is kind of the concept that is like flying in the face of something like multitasking, right? Multitasking is doing as many things as we can at the same time, or doing several things at the same time. But what is truly the quality of those things? And really focusing down on just a few things and doing those with a higher quality. So that's the concept of essentialism. But of course, if you want a deeper dive, then go ahead and read the book. There are lots of other examples and exercises that you can use. And there's a reason why I suggest the book Essentialism to my Strength, Nutrition, Unlocked students as important reading for this reason. This book really did click with me. And I wanted to outline that concept so that these questions make sense. So what does all this have to do with working out? I wanted to set up essentialism for you as we moved into the second part of this podcast so that you had a little bit of backstory when you answer these questions. Why are we asking these questions? So this can be a thought exercise for you. Grab a piece of paper and a pen, grab your notes section of your phone, whatever floats your boat, and jot down some answers to these questions. So the questions are, number one, what can I let go of doing that used to bring me joy or be fulfilling, but no longer is? We outgrow things all of the time, and you would be amazed how often people that I work with will keep doing something that is no longer fulfilling or aligned for them because they said yes so many years ago to doing the thing that now when they show up with that energy of begrudging, sort of a begrudging nature, other people can feel that, resentfulness and those sorts of things. So where can you let go of doing something that no longer is fulfilling to you? Another way to phrase that, number two, is what have I outgrown? Again, we're allowed to evolve and change, and you would be surprised how many people feel like they still should stay doing the same thing because what will people think of them if they decide they've changed? See every podcast I've done where I've talked about rebranding from Stupid Easy Paleo to what we are now as an entity, which is SG Fitness. So that change, right? I outgrew professionally that brand. I shifted directions. But what if I had stayed trying to make myself continue to do that? It would have rung hollow for everyone and been a huge, huge weight on me. Number three, and this is probably the hardest one. I'm not saying this is easy. Where do I really need to say no? This is very difficult for a lot of people. We don't want to let others down. But the thing is, we cannot manage others' emotions and emotional responses and what they say to our actions. I know it sounds a little bit tricky, but sometimes when we say yes to doing things, we've now committed ourselves time, energy, etc., and we don't have space to do the things that we really need to do to care for ourselves. Exercise is a form of self-care. We are taking care of our health, right? So where do I potentially need to say no to something? And we can say it in the most direct way, which would be no. Or we can have all sorts of ways to gently let people down that feel really aligned for us. There are tons of ways you can do this, but to practice saying no more often. And number four, what is a trade-off I'm willing to make? We cannot do everything. Recently on one of our Strength Nutrition Unlocked group calls, one of our students was talking about loving so many different activities, different sports, different activities. And she said something to the effect of, I just have to kind of pare down my list. It's hard to do it all. And that was just a conversation regarding training, not to mention all the other things that we want to do in our lives. So we may have to make trade-offs here and there. Okay, so those questions. What can I let go of doing that used to bring me joy or fulfillment but no longer does? What have I outgrown? Where do I really need to say no? And what is the trade-off I'm willing to make? And again, I know these are not easy. And you may go through this process and realize you still don't have the most time or space created for yourself, because we do not all have the same responsibilities within the same 24 hours. There are 24 hours in a day, yes. But we, from person to person, do not have the same lives, responsibilities, schedules, non-negotiables, right? So we just want to acknowledge that here on this show. I'm not saying you might go through this exercise and still say, I only have 15 minutes that I was able to create for myself, which we can do something with that time. Yes, we can absolutely see a positive impact from 15 minutes if we're talking about workouts, but it's not the same for everybody. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear with that. So let's wrap all this up. If you're ready to make exercise a more consistent part of your life, you're like, yes, it's time. I need to find the space, the time, perhaps the money, whatever it is, because we're not just talking about exercise for the hell of it, but you know that it's really important for your health and well-being, mentally, physically, emotionally. Working through essentialism, in my opinion, is one way to find these resources, to find the space, to find the time, to find the funds, whatever it is. And it can certainly be a small bit at first. You may not find hours and hours a day. See the part where I just said we don't all have the same responsibilities in the 24-hour period. But it is absolutely a valid exercise, in my opinion, to just go through and see what you find. Remember, 10 minutes is still 10 minutes. You can do a lot in those 10 minutes. And if you're struggling with that idea and thinking, well, that doesn't count, then I'm going to invite you to go back and watch the podcast that I recorded about all or nothing mindset. And certainly the other mindset episodes as well, I think will be extremely helpful for you. So remember, exercise is one of those tricky things because we can't avoid it and receive the benefits like other health behaviors you might be trying to remove from your life. I wish that there was a nice shortcut that we could implement at this point, but we're not there yet. Certainly we could talk about what kinds of exercise are really efficient you can use to get the most bang for your buck. And we've talked about that before as well. Let's go ahead and summarize this episode. We talked about why introducing or finding consistency with exercise can be challenging because it's something we have to add to our lives as a health promoting habit instead of just remove. We also talked about essentialism and how you can use its principles to carve out more space, time, energy, and resources for yourself, and some guiding questions to help you identify what's important, what you may want to say no to, and ultimately how to live more aligned to your values. Ultimately, we all don't have the same time in our day, but by implementing the principles of essentialism, hopefully you can carve out just a little bit more for yourself. Thanks for listening to this episode. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever heard of essentialism? What did you think about it? Can you implement it in your life? And make sure you subscribe to the show, whether that's on your favorite podcast app or here on YouTube. Be sure to also ring the bell for more notifications. And remember, if you're looking for a 12-month progressive strength training plan that is purpose-built for women over 40, be sure to check out Strong with Steph, or for a complete roadmap for your nutrition, training, recovery, and stress management, and the coaching that goes along with that, check out Strength Nutrition Unlocked at stephgaudreau.com/apply. Thanks so much for being with me, and I will see you next time. Until then, stay strong.